Game developers in the audience, round of applause. How many of you actually have code in your game that tries to track if user A is doing things differently than user B? A little bit? OK.
The rest of you, do you kind of wish you had code that did that? Raise your hands. No. There you go. All right. That's what I like to see.
The people who didn't raise their hands are just like waiting for the show.
They're just in it for the art.
So listen, this is clear in our modern game development ecosystem that everything we do right now is about segmentation and identification of our users so that we can best classify them and serve them the experience they want. Already today, we've talked about identifying whether or not users respond more to in-game ads or to in-app purchases and properly changing your code paths to do that. Or whether or not you need to target your ad systems to find different users and display different ads to them at the right time. This next talk is probably one of my favorite ones today, because for those of you who put your hands up that you don't have the code in your game right now to track your users and identify them and figure out what they want in your game, this is for you. Big round of applause for Mike, Snahil, and Raul.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Rahul Oak. I'm a product manager on Google Analytics for apps. And I have with me here Snail and Mike, who are hanging out in the back right now, so you probably can't see them. They're two Rockstar engineers on the Google Analytics team. They actually made sure I mentioned Rockstar in front of their names. So today, I'm here to talk about turning players into customers with Google Analytics. So what does this really mean, right? That you have a bunch of users who are using your game. They love it. They're highly engaged. But you kind of want to figure out which of those are users and which of those are customers. So what we're going to try and talk about today is a specific problem that I think, and I hope actually, that resonates with a lot of you. And then using Google Analytics, through a series of techniques and tools, how you can actually make this classification between users and customers and hopefully convert more of your users into customers. So let's talk about the big picture a little bit. And I mean, I'm a product manager. I'm going to use buzzwords a lot. And one of the buzzwords that I'm sure you've heard a lot is LTV. And it's something that the industry is striving towards. And this has been a common theme across the GDC that, I mean, as the industry has shifted, maybe 8 years ago in apps, it was all about how to get the cheapest users into my app. But I think the industry has matured at this point. And right now, you're not really looking just to get the cheapest person that you can acquire to come and play a game. You want someone who's highly engaged, highly monetized, and someone who's a really good customer. So let's dive into what this value really means, how you can measure value. And I'll talk about this problem with the help of a specific chart that we've put together. Now, a famous man once said that all users are equal, but some are more equal than others. Actually, I lied. He didn't say users. He mentioned it in the context of farm animals and not games. But it applies fairly well out here. That I'll just walk over this chart a little bit. So the y-axis is the monetization line. So everyone who's to the right of the y-axis is a well-monetized user, and everyone to the left is not. Similarly, for the x-axis, everyone to the top of the x-axis are people who are highly engaged in your game, and everyone to the bottom is not. Now, it's pretty obvious from this that the point of your game, and for any business really, is to get as many people into the top right quadrant as possible. And especially in the context of your game, that means having highly engaged users who monetize, who find it worth their while to actually spend money to get some value out of the game. The folks on the left top, they're the guys and gals who are engaged, and who you could nurture a little bit to try and move them into the right quadrant. Similarly with the folks on the right bottom, that there's some potential there, that you want to figure out some way to get them engaged again. You hope they were engaged at some point, they spent money, they went back down. So what we're going to try and do is walk over some things that we think you can do with Google Analytics that helps you solve specifically this problem and try and get everyone into the top right quadrant. I know that's not really possible, and in most cases, that's going to be sparsely populated. But I mean, we are here to create tools that help you try and get as many people in there as possible. So the solution. Snail and Mike are going to talk about the solution in a lot more detail. But before we move forward, because I realize some of you may not have used Google Analytics for apps, I'm going to go over just very, very quickly, just to set a baseline here. This is what a Google Analytics report looks like. The chart on the top, tables at the bottom, pretty pictures. But so there's some words that we're going to use throughout this talk that I want to go over first. So we think of everything in terms of metrics and dimensions. So everything that can be measured. So sessions and new users and average session duration, these are metrics. Dimensions are things that you would slice these metrics by. So in the case of this report, right, there's, it tells you where your users have come from. And that's a dimension. So where they came from, what kind of device they're using, what part of the world they're located in. And at the very basic level, Google Analytics for apps is SDKs for iOS and Android. It's totally free, and you get a lot of amazing reports to start off with. It's very, very easy to get a lot of value unlocked very quickly with just 2 or 3 lines of code. And amongst the dozens of reports that you get, I'm just going to go over maybe 2 or 3. So, I mean, one of the things that you get, new users, active users, locations, devices, these are things that you kind of expect from any analytics solution. You care about this stuff. And you can get it fairly quickly. Similarly, one of the frustrations that at least I've experienced while writing anything is once you implement something, it's out in the wild, you want to see that it's working within seconds, ideally, if not minutes. And so the real-time reports we've heard are really great for that, because you ship a new version out and you want to see if you did a few things right. And this really helps with that. Now, a little bit of code here, and these are really just 2 lines in your Android onStart and onStop. I didn't put any iOS code in there, but it's fairly easy to get this to work very, very quickly. And you don't have to believe me right now. We have an expo booth, and you can come check it out tomorrow. We're actually going to do it. We're going to have some fun with it. So the engineers have come up with a way to just tell you how easy it is. It's so easy a product manager could do it. So I'm going to try and get this up and running in like 5 minutes tomorrow. So while we talk about just metrics, dimensions, things you can measure, right, I like to think about it broadly into 2 things. One is things which are very easy for us to gather. And those are the things that you saw, the baseline stuff, new users, active users, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's some things which only you know about, and you can tell us, which is important for your game. And those are things that require a little bit more instrumentation. It's not hard, but it just requires a little bit of thought. And to go over this, let me call Snehal on stage.
Thanks, Rahul. So as Rahul said, the tracking is so easy that even a product manager can do it. And we're going to prove it, right? Rahul's going to go and prove it live at our booth tomorrow and day after, in case you missed tomorrow. But there are things that we could do automatically. Like every report that Rahul showed you shows up automatically with the 2 lines that he just showed you in the previous slide. But remember his previous slide? We want to find users that are engaged and that are monetizing. Well, only you can tell us what means engaged in your game. For your game, it may be achievements, right? OK, let's say I'm playing a game, and I unlocked an achievement. Maybe that's the engagement for you. For somebody else, it may be that, oh, I went in and I fed the character. We don't know ahead of time what it is. But what we would like to do is give you a tool to very easily send that information, whatever it is that you choose to send, to us, so that you can then use that information later on to analyze whether the users are engaged, how they're monetizing, what do they do before monetizing, what do they do after, all the fun stuff. So let's divide this up. So there's basically, I divide this up into 3 categories. There is things that you care about. These are like events. Player clicked a button. Somebody unlocked a new level. Somebody upped a level. Their second category is monetization. They had a transaction. They bought some item. They bought a set of items. And the third category is custom data. How many people here actually have their own databases that back their games? I mean, you collect your own data, right? You have all your stuff. So if you have that data, wouldn't it be nice to be able to join that data along with the data that analytics provides? Well, that's where the custom data comes in. And we're going to actually show you how to do that today. It's easy enough. We're eventually going to train Rahul to do a demo on that stuff too. Not yet, but we're getting there. So how do you track this stuff? So analytics actually moves these things into 3 groups. The first set of groups are what we call events. These are basically things that happened in your game. The second group is revenue, based, wherever you monetized your users. And the third group is the custom data. And we send that over as custom dimensions. So here's a little code snippet. I'm showing the iOS version of the code snippet just so that we could switch between iOS and Android. Both of them look very similar because at the end of the day, the data that you need to send is really the important piece. The rest of it is just a syntax between iOS and Android. So here, everything that you see in green is the things that you're sending me, except for the value, where we actually chose not to send in a value. But for every event, you can categorize your events. So we allow you to categorize your events in hierarchy, so you can actually keep them in groups. So for each event, you can send us a category, you can send us an action, and you can send us a label. And if you so choose, you can associate value. So for example, if you say, oh, I have some achievement that got unlocked, I would like to associate some value to it, you could do that, and then you can use that value in analysis. If you choose not to, no big deal. Here, we've chosen not to associate a value. If you choose not to use a hierarchy and just say, well, I'm going to only send you a category, fine. All of the parameters except the category are optional. We need at least one thing to identify the event by. So the Android version is exactly similar, except that it's in the Java syntax over the iOS syntax. So once you actually send us these events, we can actually show you flow of how users move around in your game. So you could see a report that actually tells you, oh, from your main screen, these are the things, these are the events that you're tracking that the users are doing. From the main screen, they may be going to another screen, and from those screens, they're doing other events. These flow diagrams are great to kind of visualize how the users are using your games, and you can add steps and scroll around to actually visualize more or less as you feel like doing it. Okay, so the next thing, the next group that we were talking about is revenue. At the revenue, we actually let you track revenue at 2 levels. And again, this is optional. You don't necessarily have to send us your real revenue. We're not after your data. This is really about helping you. So you select. If you choose not to send us revenue, perfectly fine. If you choose to multiply or divide your revenue numbers by something, perfectly fine. You decide what data you want to share with Google to help you. Nobody is actually looking at your data. It's really only you looking at this data in your own reports. But still, if you want to be paranoid and say, look, I don't want to really send revenue, well, send us hits with 0 revenue, because it will count as conversions, and then you can do the analysis on the conversions. If you send us revenue, it will help you monetize different items differently, right? Like, all of you probably have different items in your game that you sell. Well, if you actually send us the revenue, then you could see how different items are working out. So in this example, I'm actually sending in 2 pieces of information. I'm sending in a transaction, which is the top part. A transaction, think of this something as whatever you would send to the App Store or Play Store. You would say, hey, this user came in and they bought stuff worth this much. We do have a multi-currency support, so you can actually send in the currency that you're doing the business in. Now, the second piece is the revenue for individual line items. Some of you might have actually packages that you send. You might say, hey, I grouped these items, and here is a thing that you buy in bulk. You can actually send us multiple line items with a single transaction or single line items. Now, once you do that, you unlock the reports that actually show you revenues by different products and by transactions. So in this particular example, I'm showing that there is 2 different items that our app sells. There is the bombs and the magic potions. And you can actually see how that the revenue for both of them is about this similar, even though the individual prices are double. One is double the other. So you could choose this information to say, look, maybe potions are not as popular. I should maybe make it cheaper. Or maybe I need to make the bombs more expensive because everybody's buying them. So this allows you to do a lot of analysis of the relative values of different items for you. OK, the last piece. The last piece is the custom dimensions. This is the data that you have that you might want to use later to join this data with, join our analytics data with the other data. Think about this as Rahul earlier talked about dimensions. Think about these as extra dimensions that you can send us at different levels. Some of you might actually send them at the user level. This could be the key that you use to identify your user. Now, one thing I will stress, which is we don't want anything PII. If it is a key, it should be a key to you. We do not want the email addresses or credit card numbers or anything like that. But if it could be your key, that means nothing to Google. And that's perfectly fine, because we're considered a third party. That key can mean everything to you. It just can't mean anything to us. And that's how we define PII, which is, it's users' private information that you would not want to share with third party, right? Your users, think about what your users would be comfortable you sharing with a third party. Despite the fact that nobody's looking at that data, you shouldn't, send your keys that are random numbers to us, and that's okay. Then you could use them to do the joins. Now, custom dimensions, we actually have a two-step process for these. As step one, you actually define the custom dimension in our configuration interface. The reason behind this is we don't want them just call them custom dimension 1 or 2 or 3. We really want to use the terminology that you're familiar. If you're sending in a unique ID, we want you to be able to call that unique ID everywhere in our reporting interface. So the two things you do is you tell us the name, and then you tell us what level. You can tie things to sessions, you can tie things to users, or you can tie things to product. The things where this can be very useful is if you're running specials, you can actually send in product level information and go, oh, this product was bought as part of this special, so later you could do analysis on how different specials apply to different products. Once you actually defined it, here's how you actually send a snippet. And this is simple enough that I can actually show you both Android and iOS in one slide. It's really just a one line. It's setting the custom dimension and then sending a value with it. So in this example, I'm sending the hash CRM ID as custom dimension 1. And once you have done this, you actually send this data to analytics, and this will be available to you as your unique ID dimension everywhere in analytics. Now, how you actually take advantage of all this data that you have actually sent to us, for that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
Great. Thank you, Snehal. So great, now that we have this wonderful data about your game in Google Analytics, let's take a look to see how we can take advantage of it. Let's start by thinking about how we can do analysis of the data to gather some insight. So I'm going to focus on a very important analysis technique, which is segmentation. Google Analytics have very sophisticated support for segmentation. You can define segments for users, segments for sessions. You can define segments just about based on any Google Analytics dimensions and metrics that you can think of. Revenue, device type, even custom dimensions. Once you've defined these segments, you can apply them to any reports at any time. You can even use more than one of them together to try to compare between them. So to define a segment, it's actually very easy within Google Analytics. You can go directly to the UI and use the segment editor. Some might say it's so easy that even Rahul would be able to do this. As you can see, there are actually a number of predefined segment types that you can actually choose from based on demographics or even things like the first date of visit by the visitor. But if you have more sophisticated needs, you can actually create a lot more conditions out of all the Google Analytics dimensions and metrics and combine them in very sophisticated ways. In this slide, we've actually shown a user segment focusing in on users that actually spend more than $30 within the game. And we've called this segment highly monetized customers. Now that we have the segment defined, we can actually apply it to the Google Analytics reports. Let's suppose we want to look at the user behavior for this set of customers. We can go to the user overview report, apply the segment, and then figure out for this set of users that have actually spent a lot of money within the game, How many sessions do they come back? What's the behavior? What's their conversion characteristics? One thing that's very useful about segment is to kind of prove or disprove hypotheses that we might have. Let's suppose I'm suspecting and have a hunch that customers that convert actually spend a lot of time within the game. How do I know if that's true? One way to see that is to go to something like the loyalty report, apply the segment. That way we can actually look at the number of sessions a user come back and other characteristics such as the average amount of time that users spend per session within the game. That might help me understand whether my hypothesis or hunch is actually correct or not. This is a very powerful technique, and for those of you that haven't tried it, I would highly recommend it. So great, we can apply segments and gain a lot of insight about our users using Google Analytics. What else can we do? What we want to be able to do is actually take that insight and actually act on them. Rahul actually showed a slide dividing up the users into different buckets. Some users that may have spent a lot of money, some of them that may be engaged. Our goal, of course, is we would like to actually turn more of these users into customers. So how can Google Analytics help with that? Google Analytics have a lot of useful data that you've sent. So that's absolutely something that we want to be able to leverage. But you can actually do more with it. You may also have other sources of data, things such as CRM systems or whatnot that may contain a lot of other very useful data about your users that you want to kind of combine together. There are many ways of getting data into and out of Google Analytics. I'm not going to go into detail to most of these. If you're interested, please do come by our booth, booth 218, and find us, and we'll be happy to talk to you a lot more about them. But I do want to point out at least one way of accomplishing this goal. And that will leverage the custom dimension that Snehal talked about, that he instrumented, about the unique IDs of your users. And I'm going to show you how you can do analysis with it and also export some useful information out. So given that I want to convert users into customers, one possibility is for me to focus on the users that are currently not spending a lot of money within the game, but are highly engaged. So to identify them, I can once again define a segment, which is pretty much the inverse of what I showed you before. But in this case, I'm going to identify users that have spent a little bit of money, but not a whole lot. So basically users that have spent between $0 and $30 within the game. And I'm going to call this segment potential spenders. The next thing that I actually did is I created what we call a custom report, which is a feature within Google Analytics that allows you to select any Google Analytics dimensions and metrics that you're interested in and generate a report out of it. In this case, what I selected is actually the unique ID, the custom dimension that Snehal actually already instrumented the game to do, along with some metrics such as sessions and also in-app revenue. If I apply the segment that I showed you, we can then identify the list of users that actually have spent some money but not a whole lot within the game. Now, I also actually further subset this set of users and find out which ones of them are actually highly engaged. I can modify or create a new segment to do that, but I'm actually going to show you a different technique. What I'm going to do is actually apply an additional filter in this custom report. And I'm going to ask GA to only show the set of users that actually have spent at least 50 sessions within the game. And if I apply this filter, now I have the list of users that actually have spent a little bit of money but not a whole lot, but is very engaged in the game. I can then use the UI to actually export out the list of users very easily, simply by going to the export dropdown and selecting the format that I'm interested in. So in this case, we selected CSV file. The CSV file will contain all the users that actually fall into the bucket that we're interested in with some of the key metrics that we selected. With that, you can actually join that with data outside, for instance, in your CRM system and do further analysis. You can even take this list of users and try to target them within your game with things like better weapons, better spells, and see if you can entice them to actually pay and become actually a more active customer for you. So I've shown you how you can do this manually. There are ways to leverage this data in a programmatic way as well. For those of you interested in how to do that, please do come by our booth, booth 218, and we can talk a lot more about it. So with that, I'm going to turn the stage back to Rahul to wrap up.
Thanks, Mike. So I'll just do a quick recap of what we went over. So the problem here was that initially you saw those 3 people lonely in the top right quadrant. See, there's so many more now. They look happier. This is the end goal, right? This is what we wanted to do. And Snail and Mike talked over specific techniques within Google Analytics using which you can collect good data, analyze it, and act upon it to hopefully achieve this end goal. And before I leave the stage, though, there's one thing that I want to definitely emphasize. This morning, Russ and Jonathan spoke about this new exciting launch that we are coming up with, where you'll get all the power of Google Analytics inside the AdMob UI. And I just want to stress that it's the same. Everything that we spoke about, all of this is available directly inside AdMob. So we'd definitely love you to try that out. And that's it. Thanks again. Have any more questions? We'll be hanging out here or at the booth over the next couple of days. Thank you.